Hello, my name is Laurel Mellin, and welcome to a very short program on EBT. Over the last 30 years now, we've been looking at some of the most common health problems. In fact, 80% of health problems appear to have their roots in chronic stress. So it only made sense. What if we could use a brain-based approach to really address stress effectively? Could it be that the whole range of stress symptoms would tend to fade? In other words, there would be an economy to that. As we began to explore that, some myths arose. One was, people tend to think they have problems, when to be more articulate about it, they actually have stress symptoms. As well, many people see that when they're not feeling well, when they can't sleep at night, when they're gaining weight, they think the problem's me. But it's actually their wiring, because the wiring determines how we process stress. And there's two kinds of wiring. One is the wiring that really works. We call that a homeostatic circuit or a joy circuit, where the stimulus comes into the brain, it goes into the limbic system, triggers an effective emotional response, goes up to the neocortex, figure out how we feel and what we need, take some kind of corrective action, we're back to feeling the high level of well-being. It works. However, there's another kind of circuit, a stress circuit, also called an allostatic circuit, where the stimulus comes in, it goes into the limbic system, and unfortunately, it triggers an ineffective stress response. So instead of nicely going up to the neocortex, so we know how we feel and what we need, we're overwhelmed with stress. It triggers an unnecessary fight or flight response. And then one stress symptom leads to another. We're anxious or hostile, and we start overeating and we feel bad, and one thing leads to another, and it's really hard to pull ourselves out of that. In fact, it's like the stress buzzer gets stuck on. These stress circuits are the problem. They're the root cause of most health problems. The third myth is that wiring, that way that I process stress, well, I do that naturally. Well, that way of processing stress is stored in the emotional brain. And the truth is that the emotional brain changes with practice. Just like lifting a weight or learning to ride a bike, if we practice effective stress processing, that brain begins to change so that it moves through stress rather than getting stuck in it. And that's what we do in emotional brain training. We learn the tools to process stress with symphonic precision, so we don't get stuck in stress, and so more of our health problems begin to fade. So the current paradigm, because we didn't know until recently the neuroscience of stress and how to rewire the stress response, we were stuck with treating the symptoms of stress with an excessive reliance on medication, devices, and procedures, and the results were not all that encouraging. In some ways, yes, but it's so expensive to excessively rely on these kinds of services. As well, people would tend to improve when the intervention was in place, and then they would snap back, like regain the weight, go back to feeling discouraged or upset or anxious. What we're really looking for is a new paradigm where we treat the stress itself. We go to the roots of the problem, the wiring. In studies at UCSF, what we've seen is that people who use this method tend to improve in the short term. For example, with depression, it goes down, and instead of snapping back, even 6 years later in this particular study, depression levels stayed down. With weight, the norm is to lose weight, gain it back. Again, they retained the weight loss. They retained the exercise change, and also blood pressure. So it's promising. We need more research on EBT, but these trends are very unusual. What it looks like is the promise is to actually rewire the brain so the dominant circuits are homeostatic, are joy, naturally processing stress back to a state of well-being, because neuroplasticity is based on a use it or lose it proposition. So the more we strengthen these effective responses to stress, the more we weaken and break the ineffective processing. So how do you begin? Well, you start right where you are, and you begin learning the basics of the tools. There's a 4-week Wired for Joy telegroup. There's also e-learning, but one way or the other to begin to practice these tools, because the brain changes only with practice. And then move right into 6 courses that have been developed over the last now 20 years that follow the precise changes in the emotional brain so that you build these skills over time. So go from being used to or accustomed to or having a set point in stress to having a set point in balance and well-being. Thank you for listening to this brief talk on EBT, and welcome to the EBT.org website. Thank you again.